The economy and work. That's the title here of Chapter 18, and hope to make some comments here along with some PowerPoint slides to help you as you read along and preparing there for your quiz and exam. Okay, as you can see from this first slide there, we're looking at the overall topics in the chapter. So economic systems, a good bit of our time will be spent there. And then a case study that deals with one of those systems, capitalism in China. Some of the other topics in the chapter are work and alienation, a changing economy, and then of course social policy and the economy. So a good little article there about microfinancing. Alright, our next slide here, just our questions to think about throughout the chapter is what makes work satisfying. So there's lots of answers to that. I'm sure lots of us would say well, as long as it pays well, that's the main focus. But this question is looking at other things not related there to how much you make. Alright, second question there is deindustrialization. How has that changed the way that people work and what work people do? So that's really kind of a follow-up to the first one. And then the ever-changing workforce. What will it look like in the 21st century as compared to previous centuries? Here on our next slide we have just some definitions that help kind of narrow and focus our attention on the topics at hand. So fair trade there is mentioned, and where consumers will pay the price there that they will pay for certain types of products including foods, and that's above and beyond what it costs to make and distribute such products there. It's called fair trade and fair market, but it's higher than what it costs to produce so that they actually make a profit for what they have done. So would people actually work if they're not making a profit? And so typically not. Now we also have the different economic systems, and so those are all of them together. Now there's different types, but they are social institutions in which goods and services are produced, distributed, and consumed. Now one other thing to consider, it's the one term in the middle, is cultural relativism. And so that is the standpoint that you're looking at a country or a nation and what's considered right or wrong through the perspective of that country or nation. So our culture may say that it's wrong, but that's not how we look at it. That's really an ethnocentric point of view. Cultural relativism says, does that culture itself consider whatever you're talking about to be right or wrong? Obviously there has to be some limits to that when it comes to, say, breaking the law or acts that are just inhumane. Alright, now a little bit more on our economic systems, but when we talk about those, an industrial society, that's something we also need to talk about, and that's really something that's come up throughout the textbook quite a number of times. But it is a society that uses machines really to mass produce again those goods and services. That goes back to our definition of an economic system. Now there's different systems out there, but our book lists major two and I guess we can think of these as opposites, and they are capitalism and socialism. Alright, capitalism is what we have in the United States, or most of us have experienced in the United States if we've lived here most of our lives, but it's the system of production that says individuals can profit. So if you have a good idea and you invest the capital, then you yourself can profit from that. So the reason people will try and take on all this risk and work so many hours is that they have the possibility of making a profit, and if the public likes it, they can make a good profit. Alright, so now with capitalism, what you're going to find is there's a great deal of inequality, but it does raise the standard of living for people who live within that system. Alright, so we may have some other terms here that go along with it. Laissez-faire is where hands off. The government does not really interfere. It lets the market decide, so buyers and sellers. Now there are some rules and laws and regulations that the government has to put into place to protect the public and consumers, for example. But by and large, there's not a whole lot of government intervention. Monopoly comes from the idea that there's maybe one firm, one corporation that comes to dominate a market. So, we can think of some corporations in the United States relative to phone service and maybe banking or computer software. Think of Microsoft as a computer maker that, for most of the time, or a good portion of the time, they have a monopoly when it comes to computer operating software. Before Apple really became popular, Apple itself is something of a monopoly when it comes to the iPhones and the devices and the storage of music and video. The phone companies, same thing. There were the Bell phone companies before they were broken up, and really the same things happened with banking as well, to where now no bank in the nation can have any more than 10% of the deposits in the country there, to prevent from one major bank from taking over. Now, socialism is really the opposite point of view, and so we have to decide which one of these really we like most, or maybe a combination of them both. That would be a third alternative. But socialism there says there's not privately owned property; it's collectively owned. So the people own it, and then usually who steps in the place of the people is the government. So in reality, the government really owns it all. All right, but it is in the interest of the people. With socialism, now maybe even a more harder form of that is communism, but that comes from the word commune, and talking about everybody seen as one, as a group there, and then so everybody is pretty much the same. All right, now the goal of these two is to make an equal society, and that has been something that's really been mixed results. Worldwide, when you look at countries that use socialism, it really hasn't turned out all that well. We see lots of places that have had either communism or socialism, and they eventually changed that economic system. We haven't, not that I'm aware of, have seen a capitalist nation that has done that. Now, socialism doesn't have a lot of inequality. Everybody's pretty much the same, but they don't have as much as people in a capitalist society. So that's, socialism tries to give you some guarantees, but some of your freedoms there are sacrificed for that. So that may be okay if that's what you're looking for. As opposed to capitalism, where you have more freedom, not very many guarantees. So that may or may not be what you're looking for. The informal economy here is the goods and services that are not reported to the government. So, relatively speaking, 10% or less in the United States of the economy can be described as informal economy. As you go to more developing nations or third world nations, that percentage of economic activity that's described as informal can be much greater, or tends to be much greater. All right, so a question to think about here on slide 9 is for the working women. What do you consider to be women's work, and how is that valued? Really, I think I have mentioned that before on one of our earlier videos, but here in the United States, I had mentioned previously that what women do that they don't get paid for at home is typically something that would cost about $120,000 a year. So that's a significant amount of money, but they really don't receive any recognition for that. So that's something really to put it in perspective a little bit. All right, so here's a summary here of our three systems, economic systems that we've looked at. And there's not one perfect one. There's maybe some that work better than others, but again, that depends on what you want to do. Really, one question that I would have is, if somebody really believes in socialism or communism, then how could you have, leaders of those nations who were very wealthy? So that is inconsistent with the beliefs. The overall system is supposed to make everybody equal, so you should not have any millionaires or billionaires, and especially those in power, unless something of corruption has taken place. So, in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez, who passed away not too long ago, his fortune was estimated to be, several $billions. Well, how is that possible when they are a socialist nation? Now, you could expect something like that in a capitalist nation. Now, maybe not an elected official. That always kind of raises questions about how they got their wealth. But that is something of an oddity there that would have to be explained for a socialist or even a communistic nation. So it seems like the wealth and the power is just going to the elite or the leaders of a society rather than really helping people at large. All right, so capitalism in China. Now, politically, China is a communistic nation, but yet economically they have been capitalist for a while. So they, like Japan, have decided, many decades ago that they didn't want to be left behind economically, and so they did change some of the ways that they did things, although politically speaking, China is still a communist nation. You can see here on the chart that they are expected to be the world's largest economy by 2020. And we've got another chart that kind of puts a lot of the nation's gross domestic product, yearly gross domestic product, the value of everything that they produce in terms of goods and services, and it's compared to the United States and several other nations. The U.S. is the world's largest economy right now, and I don't know if in the next 7 years if things will change, but anyway, that's what our book has mentioned. Okay, so why would a nation decide to change its economy there? But financially speaking, capitalism was better in their interest. So here's a nation that believes in that politically. They had done that as a market. They were communist in terms of their free market, or before they allowed a free market, but then they changed it. And Japan's really not much different. I mean, they've never been really a communist nation, but they also changed their economic standing from isolationist really to a world market producer. All right, so here's a little more detail on the background there for China. So up there until basically 1949, it was illegal for personal individuals to make a profit. So they did not believe that capitalism was something that should occur. All right, so if individuals can't do it, then of course, politically speaking, the government would assume the power there. So that may be part of the idea behind having a communist or a socialist type system. All right, and then, for example, you can see how they changed their view, and for the last 10 to 15 years, they have really been making great strides as a nation. All right, so today, the Chinese economy today is listed here, and so now they are competing with a lot of people worldwide, a lot of nations worldwide, and so they are doing quite well, as the bottom comment there about cars and GM kind of lets us see how well they're doing. All right, our next slide here talking about Chinese workers and this new economy going from a communist economy there to a free market or a capitalist economy there gives people increased opportunity. And that's one of the differences that I mentioned earlier between a capitalistic and a socialistic nation is now you're going to have lots of people who don't have in a capitalist. It's going to be more unequal than what we see in a socialist, but then some people are really going to do well. And that helps, like I say, others also with the employment that they're going to get and the pay that they earn and how they spend money as well. All right, so but now, can you grow too fast? Here at the bottom of the slide mentions that, and so that's also something that the government there has to monitor. So there are some controls also, as we mentioned, that governments need to maintain, and actually you can grow too fast too quickly, and that's when inflation really hits people who live in a place, and so that's when the cost of goods and services outpace your ability to pay for them. So your money is actually being devalued every day. So that's what the Chinese government is trying to prevent from happening right now. All right, here's our graph that shows the world's largest economies, and again, it's a little bit old there. We've got this is from 2007, and then part of our data is a little bit later than that, but the earliest it seems is 2009. So the U.S. is the world's largest economy. As a matter of fact, you could add several other nations together, and it still doesn't equal what the United States produces in a year. So that's what we're looking at right there. So China is actually number 3 on this chart. Now, since 2007, that has changed. Another thing, maybe, now this chart's just looking at in terms of overall production in the economy, not debt. But the U.S. does owe China more money than any other nation combined up here. So the last time I had looked at it, is the United States owes China about like $1 trillion or a little over $1 trillion. So that's kind of like a national credit card. And we receive money. Us, the United States, receives money from China to operate every day. So the U.S. government spends about $4.5 billion a day. Alright, so they're just really getting IOUs for cash now and writing IOUs to China. Alright, so part of the problem here, or from a socialist standpoint, commenting there on maybe some of the capitalism that we're talking about, is the alienation that happens at workplaces. Alright, so with the Industrial Revolution, you have machines that are becoming more and more productive than humans. So how's that going to affect the workplace? If you have a machine that can keep working 24 hours a day, you don't have to worry about it getting sick or getting sued or health care or anything like that. You may have some other additional experiences, but how does that impact the working life of the people there? So that's something you see quite a bit in the literature there. Is alienation is when your social needs really aren't being met, and a lot of times for workers that's just as important as the financial and physical rewards of work. Alright, so Karl Marx, for example, would say that with a capitalist society this would continue to be a problem. This alienation would continue, and he would say that, hey, we need to remedy this by giving workers more control and more products over the process and their labor, so that they did not have alienation or dehumanization, or that they could be exploited by their employers. Alright, so our slide also mentions here that by the 1980s, a lot of maybe things that we might expect from alienation and dehumanization in terms of burnout was starting to show up there, at least in the literature in the 80s. Alright, now worker satisfaction, why should employers be interested in that? Is, for example, they do a better job. I don't know this in the literature. I couldn't quote a source there, but probably there would be less accidents as well. In terms of achieving the satisfaction, higher wages, shorter work week. Well, those sound two positive items there. And then, for example, what happens at work with co-workers, so that's part of to prevent the alienation and the negative factors there. Another thing there for worker satisfaction is to involve them more in the process, so get their input there, allow them more say-so in what is to be done, always letting other people feel that they have a contribution in the overall process, even though somebody else might make the final decision. I know in the 1990s a lot of this was tried to be brought about through work teams and things like that, where people would be learning more and all that, be more highly involved in the process in order to get all these good things. Alright, so the workforce is changing. We've seen that throughout history since the Industrial Revolution, and it's no difference here in no different in the U.S. workforce as well. One of those changes can be of the workforce makeup itself, so in terms of even age, race, gender. So that's our book sticks with the gender one here. So more than half of new workers are expected to be female in the future. or from 1988 to 2018. All right, so that's going to have a new social dynamic to it, and so, what can be done with employers to foster that. All right, here is a slide. I mentioned the term, but here it is, deindustrialization. But for example, it is the opposite of what we've been talking about. So as a ramp up with productivity, it's kind of like of a ramp down. So less investment and less productivity. Downsizing would also be something that would go along with this. And this is, we have seen this, especially so in the last, 3 to 4 years with our economic recession. A lot of the legislators are continually calling for increased investment, so they do not want to see what we see going on here. Now that may be related to another point when we talk about the economy. The definition mentioned how products are they're manufactured, they're distributed, and they're consumed. The economy there, to be healthy, really needs a lot of consumption, and so that's why you constantly see things about investment, about increasing technology, but it's continually to make more in order that others will consume more. And so to really be a good consumer in the United States, you need to continually be spending money. Really about 2/3 of the economy is the fact that people just spend money. All right, if people stop, then we're going to be in trouble. All right, so another good question here, pattern that our author has been using, but talks about affirmative action. So you can see which side of that you stand on there. Do you approve of affirmative action or not? Can you think of how it might come into play where you go to school or where you work or somewhere like that? Does that actually achieve some of the goals that it has been intended to do? How many in class? Do you think if we were to ask that question, how many of your fellow classmates that you've had, would they be in favor or for or against when it comes to affirmative action? Offshoring is where companies, for example, are trying to increase the bottom line, and so maybe one way to do that is instead of hiring here and having to provide benefits for employees, they can do it for people who will work much cheaper, that they'll get tax credits as well, not have to offer benefits, and still provide the functions that they need to get to their customers. So, lots of places try that as well. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Now, when they do move jobs overseas or to a new location, what have you, in this case, off U.S. soil, that does have an impact there at home at severe, because that means you got people who are losing their jobs. All right, now here's more about the global offshoring, but this is something that's really not new. That's what our first bullet on our slide is telling us. And so, this began there and involves all kinds of fields: computers, banking, accounting, any type of thing, reservations for hotels, airlines, any type of telemarketer, and probably a whole host of others that I haven't even mentioned. All right, a lot of other jobs that have been transferred offshore involve manufacturing, so maybe even some of the medicines and drugs and pills and tablets and things that we take, that applies as well. All right, so here's a chart that really shows the top 10 when it comes to what's likely to be moved offshore or possibility of being moved offshore. So computer programming and data entry seem to be very synonymous, but they're the top two. All right, we've got near the end of the chapter a little short article that talks about microfinancing. So micro being small, and financing is talking about one lending money to another. And so I'm sure, all familiar with some type of loan. I know, if you're buying a house or a car, then you probably did have to borrow some money. If maybe you didn't, or you paid it back. Good for you. All right, now here in our book just shows that, well, who's in most need of a loan? So a lot of times people who are in poverty or very close to the poverty line, they need money, but they can't get it. Maybe they don't meet the qualifications there for a lot of lenders that they have. And this is just showing an individual who is in the business of making small loans to people who really need them the most. So started out, out-of-pocket type experiment, and now it has branched to where has loaned nearly 100 million people in 100 different countries small loans. So when you say that, maybe as small as $20 and maybe no bigger than 1,000. All right, now the last little item here on the slide mentions some critics would say that the poor are really the targets of these type of lenders. Not necessarily the individuals drawn in a book, but other corporations, even large banks would say that, hey, these are the people that have targets on their back, and these big banks know it, so they're predatory lending. There is a documentary out there that really talks a little bit about that, and you can decide if it's accurate or not for yourself. But it's called Maxed Out, and so it talks about some of these practices, I think, that these critics would say that should not be going on. So, for example, we would one of the points it makes is we would not have had a housing crisis had there been a more selective process about home loans going out. But now that brings up the idea of affirmative action as well, and does everybody get a chance to borrow money? But they were indicating that just a little bit better screening and you would have cut half of those who defaulted on their homes out. But now on the flip side of that, the banks realize that the people who sometimes need credit the most have the worst credit history, and so that's really where they make a lot of their money, or most of their money, because of late fees, late charges, and things like that. So it was showing one person had filed bankruptcy, and within 3 months they were getting offers again for credit cards and other types of loans, because that's where the money is made. The banks are trying to get people who don't mind making a minimum payment or something like that for the rest of their lives. That's a great income flow for them. So there probably is some predatory lending out there. But again, now all these people, they actually signed the documents that led to these loans. But sometimes that's hard to refuse somebody when they will offer to loan you money and there's something that you want. All right, ending up our slides today, we have the applying sociology part. So, what does this mean to where we can apply it to our everyday lives and help people? So these are our big 3 theories again. Just read this slide for yourself, but nothing different from what we've seen in the previous chapters about whatever topic. It's just this time now it's applying to the small-scale loans. All right, and then one final point here is with initiating the policy based off maybe some of the findings that we've mentioned here is, reduce overlending is one, and monitor, for example, borrowers who got out of poverty. What did they do right, and how did they get out? How can that be applied and extended to others? So I can probably already tell you 2 of those things, and this may be too basic, but not using credit or using it wisely, and then reining in your excessive spending. Those are probably 2 things right there that I'm sure would help you escape poverty. I saw a list not long ago that said top things that would ensure you were in debt, and one of them was a cell phone. So I know those can get very expensive, and with all the smartphones out there, they're not cheap, and the service contracts that come with them. All right, another thing here mentioned for policy related to microfinancing is that the lenders are working with those who make the laws, our political officials, and to ensure that they do not regard one another as competitors for political support. So don't allow one to lobby for and get their way as compared to another. That's probably more impractical than the first one there, because there's just so much corruption when it comes to that. People are very unlikely, I think, to go along with that one. It seems like a good one, but that's going to take more work, I think, than the first one. Okay, we're at the end of the chapter. Thank you for your time, and I hope this has helped you a little bit. Just be sure to keep reading and let these things sink in. Just takes a little time, and I think the more you think on them, the easier they will become. So I hope you have a good day, good evening, and I will talk to you again very soon.